Guys, this Prismatic Hunter build is so strong, and I genuinely mean that. It can crowd control entire rooms with ease, thanks to near infinite uptime on transcendence and supers, deal with champs easily, and is just all around so much fun to play. If you really enjoy ability spam and melting champions and mini bosses, then this might be the build for you. Now, before we get into the build, if you guys do enjoy the content, a like and sub would be greatly appreciated. It truly helps a lot. Thank you guys so much. So this build's focus is basically the random BS go meme, but like actually though. You'll be using your abilities to stun champions and also debuff enemies to just instantly melt everything. And it will also give you some crazy good transcendence uptime with what feels like also near infinite super uptime as well thanks to our exotic. So the super we're using with this build is Silence and Squall, which just recently got a massive buff inside of PvE, and the damage it's dealing now is pretty solid. Plus, it's also one of the best anti-champion supers in my opinion, shutting down overloads and as well unstops instantly. Add in our exotic class item with Galanor and Star Eater, and you can boost its effectiveness even further by giving it an 80% damage buff, along with the ability to get half our super back when it ends. Now, the abilities used in this build are going to be Gambler's Dodge to help keep our melees up as often as we can, Snare Bomb for a way to apply a 15% debuff to enemies, which is super useful against champions and the mini bosses, so both you and your team can just melt them instantly. Plus, it's a really good in combo with Silence and Squall and your Transcendence grenades. Now, the grenade we're going to be using is Duskfield for some great area control, stun overloads and unstops, and then keep champions in place since some like to teleport like crazy, especially the overload captains in Glassway. So the aspects used in this build are going to be Threaded Spectre for a decoy to remove some enemy aggro from us, and then Winter Shroud so we can have a slowing dodge to stun overloads, plus to give us some crazy class ability energy when we slow enemies, helping cycle even more melees into our ability spam. Now, I tried Gunpowder Gamble instead of the decoys, but with the weapons used in this build, it was kind of hard to really get that going. Plus, you can't even use it during Transcendence, so please fix that, Bungie, because it would be so cool if we could. But still, I think decoys are a really solid option in GM style content. I've always been a big advocate for them since they can tank a bunch of damage that would have otherwise killed you. Now, the fragments used in this build are going to be Facet of Ruin to increase the size and damage of our stasis freeze explosions. This is great since the build heavily revolves around using stasis from our dodge, grenade, super, and as well our transcendence grenade. Next is Facet of Dawn to grant us Radiant on melee hits, meaning we can both grant ourselves a 25% damage buff while also debuffing enemies by 15% on melee use, which is great synergy. Next is Facet of Grace to give our kinetic weapons extra transcendence gain on kills, and for transcendence gains for both you and allies on kills with your super. Then Facet of Solitude for sever explosions on enemies after landing multiple crits with our primary. This will make enemies deal 40% less damage to you, which is really useful against champs since some will just straight up one-shot you at times. Plus, it can also spawn entangles for some extra free AoE damage, which is, pretty cool. Now, the last two are going to be Facet of Protection for damage resistance when surrounded by combatants, which will be really useful in GMs, maybe helping you survive some sticky situations. And then lastly, we have Facet of Purpose to grant us Frost Armor on orb pickups. Now, Frost Armor will give 4.5% damage reduction per stack, stacking up to 5 times, maxing you at 22.5% damage resist. Obviously, this is nowhere near as strong as Woven Mail's instant 40%, but hey, it's still really useful and should be easy to keep up at all times. Okay, I feel like that was kind of a lot of info, so I'll leave a screenshot of the whole subclass screen so you can just see everything all together in case you've forgotten a couple things. Okay, now on to the mods for this build. On the helmet, we're using Kinetic Siphon to spawn orbs from our primary, Heavy Ammo Finder plus a Scout as well. Now these you could really change out for something like Ashes to Assets to squeak out just that little extra super gains, but I really don't think you need it. I mean, the super gains are already insane. Now for the gloves, impact induction plus momentum transfer, so our melees and grenades can fund energy back to each other so we can cycle more abilities. On the chest piece, just use whatever resistant mods are better for the Grandmaster you are running. On the boots, recuperation for heals and orb pickups, innervation for extra grenade energy on orb pickups, and then a kinetic surge for our primary. Lastly, the class item, we're going to be using Powerful Attraction to bring orbs in on dodging to heal us, give us Frost Armor stacks, grant us grenade energy, surge stacks, and then as well, of course, build super energy. Reaper to spawn an orb on the first weapon defeat after dodging, and then a Bomber for a little extra bump to grenade energy when we dodge. The seasonal mods we're going to be using with this are going to be Elemental Siphon to spawn in stasis shards on multi-kills from our primary, which will give us melee energy, Radiant Orbs for Radiant on orb pickups for free easy damage, and as well anti-barrier if we aren't using an anti-barrier weapon, Void Hegemony for a little overshield when we defeat targets affected by our weakened melee, Shield Crush for increased melee and grenade regen plus damage since we will have Radiant plus Frost Armor up all the time, and then lastly, Transference for extra grenade and melee damage while in Transcendence. Now for the weapons used in this build, the exotic weapons are either going to be Outbreak Perfected or Kvostov. I mean, both are absolutely shredding through this week's GM, and personally with this build, I lean a little bit more towards Outbreak, since with 3 of them, you can just melt through champs insanely quick, and your super and transcendent bar fills up so fast, it actually feels like it's broken. And I will say with Kvostov specifically, you can actually fill up the bar even faster if it has enough enemies to chain to, which does seem broken. Now the other weapons used are totally flexible to whatever you prefer. I'm using Indebted Kindness with Volt Shot for good AoE, plus to deal with overloads, and sidearms are unstopped this season, so it's a nice little 2-for-1. And in the heavy slot, an Apex since it's Solar Surge this week, just to kill champs quickly. This build really has it all for me, from what feels like broken Transcendence and super uptime, to the super satisfying ability spam in Transcendence, and the ability to just clear rooms in an instant. We really have hit a point of some insane power creep, guys, and honestly, I love it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this build. It should make light work of Glassway this week, and I would assume any other GM this season. Now, I will have a dim link for you guys in the comments if you do want to try it out for yourself. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. See you guys next one. Peace.